Page 78, Book 2, Chapter 4. I won't have none of your weevily wheat, and I won't have none of your barley, but I'll take a measure of fine white flour to make a cake for Charlie. We were singing rhymes to tease Antonia while she was beating up one of Charlie's favorite cakes in her big mixing bowl. It was a crisp autumn evening, just cold enough to make one glad to quit playing tag in the yard and retreat into the kitchen. We had begun to roll popcorn balls with syrup when we heard a knock at the back door, and Tony dropped her spoon and went to open it. A plump, fair-skinned girl was standing in the doorway. She looked demure and pretty, and made a graceful picture in her blue cashmere dress and little blue hat, with a plaid shawl drawn neatly about her shoulders and a clumsy pocketbook in her hand. "Hello, Tony. Don't you know me?" she asked in a smooth, low voice, looking in at us archly. Antonia gasped and stepped back. "Why, it's Lena! Of course I didn't know you, so dressed up." Lena Lingard laughed as if this pleased her. I had not recognized her for a moment either. I had never seen her before with a hat on her head, or with shoes and stockings on her feet, for that matter. And here she was, brushed and smoothed and dressed like a town girl, smiling at us with perfect composure. "Hello, Jim," she said carelessly as she walked into the kitchen and looked about her. "I've come to town to work, too, Tony." "Have you now? Well, ain't that funny?" Antonia stood ill at ease and didn't seem to know just what to do with her visitor. The door was open into the dining room, where Mrs. Harling sat crocheting and Frances was reading. Frances asked Lena to come in and join them. "You are Lena Lingard, aren't you? I've been to see your mother, but you were off herding cattle that day. Mama, this is Chris Lingard's eldest girl." Mrs. Harling dropped her worsted and examined the visitor with quick, keen eyes. Lena was not at all disconcerted. She sat down in the chair Frances pointed out, carefully arranging her pocketbook and gray cotton gloves on her lap. We followed with our popcorn, but Antonia hung back, said she had to get her cake into the oven. "So you have come to town," said Mrs. Harling, her eyes still fixed on Lena. "Where are you working?" "For Mrs. Thomas, the dressmaker. She's going to teach me to sew. She says I have quite a knack. I'm through with the farm. There ain't any end to the work on a farm, and always so much trouble happens. I'm going to be a dressmaker." "Well, there have to be dressmakers. It's a good trade. But I wouldn't run down the farm if I were you," said Mrs. Harling rather severely. "How is your mother?" "Oh, mother's never very well. She has too much to do. She'd get away from the farm, too, if she could. She was willing for me to come. After I learn to do sewing, I can make money and help her." "See that you don't forget to," said Mrs. Harling skeptically, as she took up her crocheting again and sent the hook in and out with nimble fingers. "No, I won't," said Lena blandly. She took a few grains of the popcorn we pressed upon her, eating them discreetly and taking care not to get her fingers sticky. Frances drew her chair up nearer to the visitor. "I thought you were going to be married, Lena," she said teasingly. "Didn't I hear that Nick Svensson was rushing you pretty hard?" Lena looked up with her curiously innocent smile. "He did go with me quite a while, but his father made a fuss about it and said he wouldn't give Nick any land if he married me, so he's going to marry Annie Iverson. I wouldn't like to be her. Nick's awful sullen, and he'll take it out on her. He ain't spoke to his father since he promised." Frances laughed. "And how do you feel about it?" "I don't want to marry Nick or any other man," Lena murmured. "I've seen a good deal of married life, and I don't care for it. I want to be so I can help my mother and the children at home, and not have to ask leave of anyone." "That's right," said Frances. "And Mrs. Thomas thinks you can learn dressmaking?" "Yes'm. I've always liked to sew, but I never had much to do with. Mrs. Thomas makes lovely things for all the town ladies. Did you know Mrs. Gardner is having a purple velvet made? The velvet came from Omaha. My, but it's lovely." Lena sighed softly and stroked her cashmere folds. "Tony knows I never did like out-of-door work," she added. Mrs. Harling glanced at her. "I expect you'll learn to sew all right, Lena, if you'll only keep your head and not go gadding about to dances all the time and neglect your work the way some country girls do." "Yes'm. Tiny Soderball is coming to town, too. She's going to work at the Boys' Home Hotel. She'll see lots of strangers," Lena added wistfully. "Too many, like enough," said Mrs. Harling. "I don't think a hotel is a good place for a girl, though I guess Mrs. Gardner keeps an eye on her waitresses." Lena's candid eyes, that always looked a little sleepy under their long lashes, kept straying about the cheerful rooms with naive admiration. Presently she drew on her cotton gloves. "I guess I must be leaving," she said, irresolutely. Frances told her to come again, whenever she was lonesome or wanted advice about anything. Lena replied that she didn't believe she would ever get lonesome in Black Hawk. She lingered at the kitchen door and begged Antonia to come and see her often. "I've got a room of my own at Mrs. Thomas's with a carpet." Tony shuffled uneasily in her cloth slippers. "I'll come sometime, but Mrs. Harling don't like to have me run much," she said evasively. "You can do what you please when you go out, can't you?" Lena asked in a guarded whisper. "Ain't you crazy about town, Tony? I don't care what anybody says. I'm done with the farm." She glanced back over her shoulder toward the dining room where Mrs. Harling sat. When Lena was gone, Frances asked Antonia why she hadn't been a little more cordial to her. "I didn't know if your mother would like her coming here," said Antonia, looking troubled. "She was kind of talked about out there." "Yes, I know. But Mother won't hold it against her if she behaves well here. You needn't say anything about that to the children. I guess Jim has heard all that gossip?" When I nodded, she pulled my hair and told me I knew too much anyhow. We were good friends, Frances and I. I ran home to tell Grandmother that Lena Lingard had come to town. We were glad of it, for she had a hard life on the farm. Lena lived in the Norwegian settlement west of Squaw Creek, and she used to herd her father's cattle in the open country between his place and the Shimerdas. Whenever we rode over in that direction, we saw her out among her cattle, bareheaded and barefooted, scantily dressed in tattered clothing, always knitting as she watched her herd. Before I knew Lena, I thought of her as something wild that always lived on the prairie, because I had never seen her under a roof. Her yellow hair was burned to a ruddy thatch on her head, but her legs and arms, curiously enough, in spite of constant exposure to the sun, kept a miraculous whiteness which somehow made her seem more undressed than other girls who went scantily clad. The first time I stopped to talk to her, I was astonished at her soft voice and easy, gentle ways. The girls out there usually got rough and mannish after they went to herding, but Lena asked Jake and me to get off our horses and stay a while, and behaved exactly as if she were in a house and were accustomed to having visitors. She was not embarrassed by her ragged clothes, and treated us as if we were old acquaintances. Even then, I noticed the unusual color of her eyes, a shade of deep violet, and their soft, confiding expression. Chris Lingard was not a very successful farmer, and he had a large family. Lena was always knitting stockings for little brothers and sisters, and even the Norwegian women, who disapproved of her, admitted that she was a good daughter to her mother. As Tony said, she had been talked about. She was accused of making Ole Benson lose the little sense he had, and that at an age when she should still have been in pinafores. Ole lived in a leaky dugout somewhere at the edge of the settlement. He was fat and lazy and discouraged, and bad luck had become a habit with him. After he had had every other kind of misfortune, his wife, Crazy Mary, tried to set a neighbor's barn on fire and was sent to the asylum at Lincoln. She was kept there for a few months, then escaped and walked all the way home, nearly 200 miles traveling by night and hiding in barns and haystacks by day. When she got back to the Norwegian settlement, her poor feet were as hard as hoofs. She promised to be good and was allowed to stay at home, though everyone realized she was as crazy as ever, and she still ran about barefooted through the snow, telling her domestic troubles to her neighbors. Not long after Mary came back from the asylum, I heard a young Dane who was helping us to thrash tell Jake and Otto that Chris Lingard's oldest girl had put Ole Benson out of his head, until he had no more sense than his crazy wife. When Ole was cultivating his corn that summer, he used to get discouraged in the field, tie up his team, and wander off to wherever Lena Lingard was herding. There he would sit down on the draw side and help her watch her cattle. All the settlement was talking about it. The Norwegian preacher's wife went to Lena and told her she ought not to allow this. She begged Lena to come to church on Sundays. Lena said she hadn't a dress in the world any less ragged than the one on her back. Then the minister's wife went through her old trunks and found some things she had worn before her marriage. The next Sunday, Lena appeared at church, a little late, with her hair done up neatly on her head, like a young woman wearing shoes and stockings and the new dress which she had made over for herself very becomingly. The congregation stared at her. Until that morning, no one, unless it were Ole, had realized how pretty she was, or that she was growing up. The swelling lines of her figure had been hidden under the shapeless rags she wore in the fields. After the last hymn had been sung and the congregation was dismissed, Ole slipped out to the hitch bar and lifted Lena on her horse. That in itself was shocking. A married man was not expected to do such things, but it was nothing to the scene that followed. Crazy Mary darted out from the group of women at the church door and ran down the road after Lena, shouting horrible threats. "Look out, you! Lena Lingard, look out! I'll come over with a corn knife one day and trim some of that shape off you. Then you won't sail around so fine, making eyes at the men." The Norwegian women didn't know where to look. They were formal housewives, most of them, with a severe sense of decorum. But Lena Lingard only laughed her lazy, good-natured laugh and rode on, gazing back over her shoulder at Ole's infuriated wife. The time came, however, when Lena didn't laugh. More than once, Crazy Mary chased her across the prairie and round the Shimerda's cornfield. Lena never told her father. Perhaps she was ashamed. Perhaps she was more afraid of his anger than of the corn knife. I was at the Shimerda's one afternoon when Lena came bounding through the red grass as fast as her white legs could carry her. She ran straight into the house and hid in Antonia's feather bed. Mary was not far behind. She came right up to the door and made us feel how sharp her blade was, showing us very graphically just what she meant to do to Lena. Mrs. Shimerda, leaning out of the window, enjoyed the situation keenly and was sorry when Antonia sent Mary away, mollified by an apronful of bottle tomatoes. Lena came out from Tony's room behind the kitchen, very pink from the heat of the feathers, but otherwise calm. She begged Antonia and me to go with her and help get her cattle together. They were scattered and might be gorging themselves in somebody's cornfield. Maybe you lose a steer and learn not to make some things with your eyes at married men, Mrs. Shimerda told her hectoringly. Lena only smiled her sleepy smile. I never made anything to him with my eyes. I can't help it if he hangs around, and I can't order him off. It ain't my prairie. Chapter 5. After Lena came to Black Hawk, I often met her downtown, where she would be matching sewing silk or buying findings from Mrs. Thomas. If I happened to walk home with her, she told me all about the dresses she was helping to make, or about what she saw and heard when she was with Tiny Soderbull at the hotel on Saturday nights. The boys' home was the best hotel on our branch of the Burlington, and all the commercial travelers in that territory tried to get into Black Hawk for Sunday. They used to assemble in the parlor after supper on Saturday nights. Marshall Field's man, Anson Kirkpatrick, played the piano and sang all the latest sentimental songs. After Tiny had helped the cook wash the dishes, she and Lena sat on the other side of the double doors between the parlor and the dining room, listening to the music and giggling at the jokes and stories. Lena often said she hoped I would be a traveling man when I grew up. They had a gay life of it, nothing to do but ride about on trains all day and go to theaters when they were in big cities. Behind the hotel, there was an old store building, where the salesmen opened their big trunks and spread out their samples on the counters. The Black Hawk merchants were to look at these things and order goods, and Mrs. Thomas, though she was retail trade, was permitted to see them and go get ideas. They were all generous, these traveling men. They gave Tiny Soderbull handkerchiefs and gloves and ribbons and striped stockings and so many bottles of perfume and cakes of scented soap that she bestowed some of them on Lena. One afternoon in the week before Christmas, I came upon Lena and her funny, square-headed little brother Chris standing before the drugstore gazing in at the wax dolls and blocks and Noah's Arks arranged in the frosty show window. The boy had come to town with a neighbor to do his Christmas shopping, for he had money of his own this year. He was only 12, but that winter he had got the job of sweeping out the Norwegian church and making the fire in it every Sunday morning. A cold job it must have been, too. We went into Duckford's dry goods store, and Chris unwrapped all his presents and showed them to me, something for each of the 6 younger than himself, even a rubber pig for the baby. Lena had given him one of Tiny Soderbull's bottles of perfume for his mother, and he thought he would get some handkerchiefs to go with it. They were cheap, and he hadn't much money left. We found a table full of handkerchiefs spread out for view at Duckford's. Chris wanted those with initial letters in the corner, because he had never seen any before. He studied them seriously while Lena looked over his shoulder, telling him she thought the red letters would hold their color best. He seemed so perplexed that I thought perhaps he hadn't enough money after all. Presently he said gravely, "Sister, you know Mother's name is Bertha. I don't know if I ought to get B for Bertha or M for Mother." Lena patted his bristly head. "I'll get the B, Chrissy. It will please her for you to think about her name. Nobody ever calls her by it now." That satisfied him. His face cleared at once, and he took 3 reds and 3 blues. When the neighbor came in to say that it was time to start, Lena wound Chris's comforter about his neck and turned up his jacket collar. He had no overcoat, and we watched him climb into the wagon and start on his long, cold drive. As we walked together up the windy street, Lena wiped her eyes with the back of her woolen glove. "I get awful homesick for them all the same," she murmured, as if she were answering some remembered reproach.